During this difficult time, we need reminders of transformational power and hope. Hear these words from Mark chapter 4, verses 26 through 32. Jesus also said, "The kingdom of God is as if someone would scatter seed on the ground and would sleep and rise night and day, and the seed would sprout and grow, and he does not know how. The earth produces of itself first the stalk, then the head, then the full grain in the head. But when the grain is ripe, at once he goes in with his sickle because the harvest has come." Jesus also said, "With what can we compare the kingdom of God? Or what parable will we use for it? It is like a mustard seed, which, when sown upon the ground, is the smallest of all the seeds on earth. Yet, when it is sown, it grows up and becomes the greatest of all shrubs and puts forth large branches, so that the birds of the air can make nests in its shade." Jesus told lots of stories about farming, maybe because many of his followers were intimately familiar with planting seeds and watching them grow. Earlier in the same chapter of Mark's Gospel, Jesus told another story about a farmer who went out to sow seeds, and some fell on rocky ground, some fell on the path, some fell in rich soil and grew and produced a yield. Others were carried away by the birds. It's a story about a farmer who seems to scatter with reckless generosity and hopeful abundance. Not all the seed grows, but some will. I like these stories. The story about the farmer who accepts a high rate of failure because the harvest is worth it. The story about the farmer who plants seeds and sleeps and rises the next day and marvels, not knowing how the seed grows. The story about the farmer who watches a seed so small and insignificant it almost just looks like the dirt become an abundant place of shelter and shade for the birds. Just Hope is a nonprofit organization that establishes long-term partnerships grounded in solidarity, mutuality, collaboration between Nicaraguan and U.S. communities. About 5 years ago in Chacraseca, one small rural community in Nicaragua, a group of farmers working with Just Hope initiated a dream of a model farm. Collaborating with other Just Hope partners, they were able to establish this farm, and it continues growing today, offering stories of the power of hope and the transformational power that continues the creative process of establishing God's reign. These farmers started the model farm because they were concerned about the increased drought and high temperatures in their area. They noted that climate conditions were changing. And they said, if you only have a few acres of land and your family depends on agriculture to survive, you can't really afford to experiment or innovate with new crops that might or might not work. So they said farmers tend to stick with what they know worked in the past. Yet they were aware that farmers around the world are sharing knowledge now and discovering new possibilities. And so the model farm was born. Let me describe 3 visits I've made to the model farm over the years. My first visit to the model farm in Chacraseca must have been around 2017. I was there with a group of people, and some of the farmers were explaining to us the model and the dream for the farm. The plan was to use one portion of the farm to generate income by growing a crop that they already knew would produce well there. The income that was generated from that section of land would produce the ability to innovate and then try and replicate successes from the innovation on another portion of the land. In addition to that, the land would be a place for education of themselves and neighboring farmers about new farming practices in response to climate change. While we were hearing about this presentation, a farmer drove up the driveway of the model farm and said that he had come to pick up some moringa seeds. And he told us that because of the model farm, he had learned about this fast-growing, drought-resistant seed, moringa, grown in India and parts of Africa, that has high nutritional content in every part of the plant. One of his neighbors had had great success with it. He wanted to try it on his land. He was excited about sharing practical experience and discovery through the model farm. It was great for us on that first visit to get to see that already the model farm was having transformational power in the community. It reminded me of a story of Eliza Lucas Pinckney, who was a 16-year-old girl in South Carolina in the year 1738. She was intrigued with studying botany, and in charge of her father's farm, she tried planting ginger, cotton, alfalfa, and hemp, and another crop, indigo. The neighbors laughed at her, sure that it wouldn't come to anything. But her experimentation with indigo transformed farming in that whole region. In fact, indigo became the second most important cash crop within only a few years in that region. Imagination and innovation can be vehicles for transformational power. Reminds me of the story that Jesus told, that story of the parable of the sower who scattered some seed that the birds carried away, others that fell in places where it couldn't grow. The cost of a creative process means that you have to try a lot of things, and some of them aren't going to work. JustHope's partnership includes an abundance of grace. The model farm demonstrates the ways in which people are encouraged to experiment, to try different things, and to keep going, even if others are just absolutely convinced that it's not going to work or laugh at your new ideas. It's worth the risk of losing lots of attempts because the part that grows is worth it. My second visit to the model farm in Chacraseca was about a year later. That time I was with a team of volunteers, and we were volunteering to do some labor on the model farm. We were sorting compost, smelly work, sorting compost for experiments, making organic fertilizer and pesticides. One of our Nicaraguan partners who was supervising us was trying lots of different things. Many small, insignificant variables. And there we were sorting through the rotting mangoes and the lemon rinds and overripe fruit in the compost. Small, insignificant acts. And yet they might have a great yield someday. I thought of Thomas Edison, who once said, "I did not fail 1,000 times. The light bulb was an invention with 999 steps of discovery." So as we sorted the smelly, rotting fruit into buckets for the experiment, we knew that most of these recipes, most of these buckets of compost would not work. And there would be no instantaneous overnight success. But our collaboration with our partners in Nicaragua connected us in our appreciation for the joy of gardening and farming and our determination to keep seeking sustainable solutions to reverse climate change. Love of gardening transcends national borders and can unite us across cultural, political, and even language divides. It was delightful to see people from the United States and people from Nicaragua share their enthusiasm for growing food. I'm never happier than when I'm digging in the dirt. I grew up with grandparents who were farmers and parents who liked to garden. For us, planting was a family event when I was a kid. I loved the way the earth felt in the springtime in Oklahoma. It was still cool and even cold down deep in the furrows, but the sun warmed the topsoil so that that soft, crumbly dirt felt warmer than my feet as we planted. I loved the way the ground smelled. Still the musty, molding, brown smells of rotting leaves of fall and winter, but that scent was balanced by the fresh, wet spring rain and light breezy days that followed. I loved the way the land changed with the seasons. I loved watching the miracles of nature unfurling and changing a little bit every day. The garden was the most mysterious marvel of all. Like the story Jesus told about the farmer who planted the seed and had no idea how it grew. Through that story, Jesus encourages us to practice a posture of wonder, of appreciation for mystery, and an awareness that there is power that is transforming the world even beyond our efforts. Power that we can participate in, that we can support, but not power that we can completely control or force. When I was a kid gardening, I would watch as we put those tiny dried up seeds, almost too small to distinguish from the dirt. And within a few months, the earth itself and the rain transformed those seeds into the food that we ate. How could that happen? How did black-eyed peas, turnip greens, potatoes, green beans, onions, okra come out of the dirt when all we saw go in was rain and those tiny, dry seeds? I can think of no greater miracle than this everyday marvel of dying and rising. We connect to the land as creatures, like farmers in a garden, made of dust, renewed, recreated, reformed, and sustained by dust until finally we return to the earth. Like the farmer who marveled watching the tiny, seemingly insignificant seed grow into abundant, strong branches for shelter. The seeds go into the ground in one shape and a rose in another form, continually transformed from sprout to shoot, from shoot to stalk, from stem to leaf, to a bush covered with blossoms that swell into fruit or food. And Jesus said, the realm of God is like this. It's like a seed transforming. It's like a process of planting, tending, and harvesting. My last visit to the model farm in Chacraseca was about a year ago, July 2019. And there I met again with 3 older farmers, some of the original 3 who first dreamed up the model farm, Pedro Luis, Augustine, Miguelito, and a couple of younger guys, neighbors working together, collaborating in this process with partners from the United States and people, farmers, innovating all around the world. They told me about how some of the efforts of the model farm hadn't worked out as they had hoped. They were trying again, and they were excited about the fruit trees they were planting and new efforts to repair the cistern. They were beaming with pride at the parts of the model farm that were successful, clearly enjoying their collaboration as neighbors in a shared effort to improve their community with sustainable and innovative agriculture. They could tell that they were part of the solution for a healthier future. I sat with them, listening and learning about an educational program to try a variety of rice that was new to that region, that required less water, that was more drought tolerant. And I observed that they were still curious, still imaginative. There was a power, maybe in the dirt of that farm, that helped them continue growing, expanding, exploring. So the dream of the model farm is like a seed that keeps sprouting and growing. It has a resiliency and a potential for growth and transformation that we can describe, but not totally reduce to some conceptual understanding, not totally control or force, and certainly not rush. Have you ever watched a garden grow day by day, week by week? Have you ever watched a tree grow year by year over decades? Don't look for any high speed, instantaneous results. Watching seeds sprout and grow must be seen in slow motion. Stephen Covey is a leadership guru. He has a book entitled The Speed of Trust. I love that phrase. He writes about collaboration and teamwork and how it takes a lot more time than just top-down control pushing toward an easily identifiable goal. The speed of trust. That's a phrase that describes the work of JustHope. The model farm is only one example of the kind of transformational power that JustHope has. And through JustHope, I have seen lives transformed, both the lives, the daily lives, and the quality of life for partners in Nicaragua, but also for people like me, US citizens, who collaborate and experience transformation through that collaboration as well. Each of us is growing and developing. One day, two caterpillars were walking along down a garden path when suddenly they were startled by a shadow overhead that blocked the sun. They glanced up and they saw a large, flying, colorful, brilliant butterfly that was casting the shadow over them. And one of the caterpillars turned to the other and said, "You will never get me up in one of those things." While we are sleeping, playing, working, whether we are aware of it or not, whether we want to change or not, we are a part of creation's process of expanding, unfolding, evolving power. We can try and work with the process, or we can try and resist the process with all of our might. JustHope's model farm in Chacraseca is a transformational possibility. where partners are planting dreams and cultivating justice and nurturing sustainable visions of the future. As JustHope partners, we are engaging one another in cultural exchanges, cooperative learning, mutual dialogue, and sharing resources, with a focus on increasing global understanding. We seek empowerment towards self-determination and emphasize leadership development and sustainability. Transforming the lives of Nicaraguans, but also of North Americans, mutual transformation, collaboration with a commitment to long-term partnerships. God's power works in mysterious ways, and what a joy to participate in the process. I've had a taste of that through the model farm at JustHope, and it keeps growing.